Hello, I'm James Woodcock from pixelrefresh.com. And today, of course, I have my co-host, Tony Warriner, one of the founders of Revolution Software. You may know that as a company for Broken Sword, Beneath a Steel Sky, Law of the Temptress, and others besides. Welcome again, Tony.
Hello there.
And also, a first visitor to the Game and Gadget podcast, I have with me Karl, who's from the website Retro. That's a lot of R's. The Retro website. I have a conscious decision to make. I sometimes struggle with R's. So putting R's next to W's is one of the worst things I can ever have. Nobody really notices until I have to say an R then a W. Retro 32 website. There we go. We're not editing that out, folks. That's staying in. Which covers a lot of repairs and mods, but it's a lot of Amiga. One of your key menus is all about the Amiga, but it's also about other hardware as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the Game and Gadget podcast.
No, thank you for having me.
No problem at all. And the reason Karl is here as much as anything, not only does he know quite a bit about these subjects, but I have an Atari 520 STFM. And one of the things I wanted to do with this beautiful computer was add one of those sort of emulator drives. So it replaces the floppy disk drive, and it's called a Gotek. And you put that in instead, and you put in then a USB stick with disk images on it, and then you play it from that instead, which is super convenient. And if you want to have a look at a wider library, that's also a perfect way of just pressing a button. You've got your image ready to go, the Atari loads it up, and you get to enjoy a whole new collection of games. Now, anyone in the retro scene knows, these collectors who want to buy the cartridges or the discs of whatever format that wants to be, but it gets quite expensive very quickly. And the hardware isn't getting any cheaper either. Now, there are bargains still to be had. There's a couple of nice articles on pixelrefresh.com where I picked up an Electron for £20, and the Atari wasn't actually that much more. But they were in a bit of a state. They didn't look particularly nice, but a good scrub and a rinse, and they looked great. And the Atari ST was just begging for me to try the collection that's available as a library. And that drive, that Gotek drive, was the way to go. So, Karl, very kindly, we're in discussions about the first one that was sent out. We had some slight issues with it. Karl had fantastic customer service, and that's always important with these things. Sent out a second one, no fuss. We got it all sorted, and I'm up and running. And it's this beautiful little Gotek drive with a little tiny OLED display in it. And then I can see the full file names of what's actually on the USB stick. Now, you can have it without that little OLED display, but then you have to use your memory, because then you just get it's disk number 1, 2, 3, 4, and until it's loaded up, you don't really know what it is unless you've been super clever, created yourself a list. And I think there are little shortcut keyboard controls as well, so you can see what's on there. But just having that little OLED display on the side is super convenient for just flicking through very quickly. So thank you for your customer support, Karl. It was top notch.
No, that's cool. It's a pleasure. I say it's one of those things that sometimes these things happen. It's kind of how you deal with these things afterwards. And there you go. Sometimes you just got to get these things working. But no, it's nice. I say I don't do a huge amount of Atari stuff, and I think the only reason I actually had that one is because I bought a bundle job lot that actually included an ST. And the person that picked it up actually did ask for a Gotek. So it was one of those things. Once you've done one, it's easy enough to knock another one out. But I do have one in the collection somewhere, but I think it was thrown down the stairs. Probably in some kind of fit of rage or by some kind of Amiga owner. So, it doesn't see the light of day. But so it's nice to do things that aren't always Amigas. So no, I'm glad that it worked out for you.
Thanks, Karl. And Tony, from the last podcast, we were having some great discussions about the Anbernic, which is a little portable gaming device, all the way from China, folks, which comes with maybe some questionable content in terms of the ROM selection it comes with. Probably would raise a few eyebrows. Not necessarily the most legal thing to be selling, but as it's China, they have a little bit more nuance of what is acceptable and what isn't. But if you ignore the ROM side of it and the actual hardware, the £40 one for the original model, and then there's the new Plus version, which is a little bit more. I think it was about 56 to around £60, depending on the memory card configuration you go for. I think was an absolute steal. Tony was so impressed in the last podcast. He kind of said, "Oh yes, I'm going to get one." I wasn't sure if he meant it, but I promise you, folks, as soon as that podcast finished, and I sent him a link, he ordered one, and now he's got one.
It took ages to come, but yeah.
Well, China, my friend, China.
Yeah, it's like a month. But I'm one of these people that you get once you get the tracking page, it's like you can't leave it alone.
You're one of these. Hit F5.
I know it's 3 weeks away, but it might have changed. Refresh. So 3 or 4 weeks of that was good.
But it arrived.
It did arrive.
And now you've got it. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it's cheap, isn't it?
Well,
cheap
yes.
Cheap in all ways. I'd rather it was slightly more money and slightly better sorted out. Like, I don't know. I found the flashing the image and all that slightly confusing and difficult, and frightening. But I mean, I should be able to do that kind of thing. I mean, I did do it, but I think you pointed me in the right page. When you got to look at a website and actually understand what instructions are, that's quite difficult for me. So, because I never read instructions.
Yeah. So, as a Chinese product, the description of things isn't that great on the website too. So, as it comes, it's actually works pretty darn well, it has to be said. And compared to the original model that came out, you don't have to think about, I need to install another operating system on there, because the one that comes with it, particularly if you select the second option on the screen, Tony, which it takes you straight into the proper emulator software, that is the way to go. So you could have quite managed pretty well on what it came with. However, like me, you like the latest and greatest firmware on there or the latest software. So we had to go through the fun and, dare I say, hassle of getting it updated, which meant you're lucky, Tony, because when I first did this, I had to download a close to 64 gigabyte file, which was split up into multiple files. And that was the only way you could get the actual operating system update, because you had to get the ROMs as well. So you had to get the whole thing. Now, at least, they've split it up into two. So you've got the operating system on one SD card, micro SD card that is, and the second one, which has the ROMs on. So now you've gone through the pain, the next time, the download, instead of being the 64 gigabyte giant, you can just get the little operating system update.
That's probably a good thing. I mean, the strange thing was that it all changed. It had a lot more games on the original one that came through the post, the original machine, and then it changed. Having then updated it and done both, I got both discs, because I bought two. Everyone told me to buy two new USB micro thingies.
When you're saying everyone, folks, it means me.
And Martin.
Martin as well. Oh, God, I'm glad he's been whispering in your ear as well.
But you probably told him that, so it probably comes down to just
not guilty, Governor. I think he was the one who told me, so I'm going to blame Martin because he's not here.
Okay, so it all comes down to one person, whichever way you look at it. Anyway, so I went out and bought two new micro thingies and did it all fresh and proper, like you're supposed to. But then I had a lot less games on the download, even though it all came from Anbernic, presumably. So I don't know. I don't understand why that was, but anyway, it does work now, so that's good.
Have you got the original card still?
Well, probably, yeah, somewhere.
So that will have the original selection on there, so you could, in theory, copy.
Yeah, I suppose I could. If I knew what game. I mean, there's so many games. I don't know what I'm missing. Like, so, there are like a million games, and now there are like 750,000 games. Like, which are the ones that are missing off the new download from the original one? But I'm not going to play them all anyway. I just thought it was odd that it changed.
Well, if you feel like you've lost out, just go to the ROMs folder, I think it's called, copy and paste, and then if it says it's already there, apply to all, ignore all, and you're in business.
I don't quite understand why the original second ROM disc didn't work with the updated OS anyway. Like, is it so different that it won't read the original disc too? It seems a bit unusual.
I think they've just rearranged things a bit, that's all. So I think in theory you could manage it, but it would take as to getting a head down, figuring it all out, and life's too short. We just want to pick it up and enjoy the thing.
So when I say it's cheap, this is what I mean. It's like, we're used to things like just update themselves, right?
Indeed. And this is the irony, is because this one actually connects to Wi-Fi. So you would hope that the software, I should say, really, the software operating system could update that way, and it doesn't.
But it does connect to Wi-Fi for no reason whatsoever.
I think it's so it can connect to services where you can get retro achievements.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're one of those achievement hoarders, Tony, this is the way to do it.
Updating the discs was the achievement.
Okay. But the reason, and by the way, to be fair to Martin, it was absolutely spot on advice, because I know he'll watch this podcast. But no, it is. Generally, he's absolutely right. The micro SD card that comes with it is probably going to be the cheapest of the cheap, given the price of the actual thing. So it's bound to fail at some point. So having a fresh, proper micro SD branded one makes sense.
It's also quite good to have the originals still in the state that they were supplied. So
exactly,
that's good. It's quite good that they come on little things that you can just swap them out. Because other people are talking about putting garlic sauce on it because that does other things better or something.
It does on the original one.
So, I'd buy some more discs for that, and then I could swap those in and out.
We're going right down the rabbit hole here. But trust me, the original operating system was not very good at all. So when got this alternative, Garlic OS came out, everyone was like, oh, this is the way to go. Everyone should install Garlic OS, to the point that Anbernic actually started shipping it as an alternative OS where you could just switch between the two. But for the Plus version we have, if we install Garlic OS, at least the last time I looked, you lose a lot of the features, and I don't think it's taking full advantage of the GPU yet. So right. You lose rather than gaining.
Yeah.
So take it from me, Anbernic Plus users of the version model number RG35XX. I don't remember that off the top of my head. I can tell you that for nothing. But if you've got the RG35XX Plus, when you boot up, just select the second option on your screen, and that is the way to go. Try it, Tony.
I'm not convinced any of this is better than just getting the original hardware working for the games you really want to play.
Okay. £40 for the original one. £56-ish for the Plus. Now, let's talk about original hardware. As soon as you bring it up, Tony, I brought my beautiful Atari 520 STFM, which I thought was very reasonable at around 60 quid. But it was mucky. Really mucky. And they said the floppy disk drive didn't appear to be working. So I took a gamble. It came. And my goodness, it was lived up to it was really mucky. The photos didn't really do it justice. I managed to fix the floppy drive because, like most floppy drives that fail, it's the little belt on it that's deteriorated because of its age. So it goes all gooey and horrible, and you have to get a little screwdriver carefully in there to remove the residue. And I know Karl knows what I'm talking about here. And then he put a new belt on, and lo and behold, it worked again. And it worked so well, I replaced it with a Gotek drive. But there we go. That's another story. But the point is, I paid £60 for that. Then I purchased the Gotek drive, which, trust me, was, it was around the original RG35XX price. Then I thought, I need an RGB SCART cable because, I don't want to plug in some... Who wants to get coaxial these days into like what would be the RF connector where we would have plugged it where your aerial would have gone? No, not really. And I don't have the money to buy one of the fancy monitors designed especially for it. Then we are talking a whole new territory of expense. So I got a RGB SCART, which I can plug into my CRT TV, my little 14-inch there. Or I can go into my OSSC upscaler and plug it into a computer monitor. Great. But that's another cost. That's probably another 25, 30 quid for a good quality, insulated, all the bells or whistles, dancing, etc. So that's another expense. And then if anything fails, there's another expense. If there's a problem with the mouse, there's another expense. Because trust me, these things fail. Not overly regularly, but whenever you're buying one off eBay or you're looking on Facebook Marketplace or it's for a friend and family, these things, because of their age, they are a bit of a gamble. And even with all the best intentions, there is going to be a problem at some point.
But does the Anbernic even do the Atari ST?
Well, I'm not sure if that's the best device to do the Atari ST because you'd want a keyboard.
So you need an Atari ST. There you
go. What I'm saying is, Tony, you just want this good debate. What I'm saying is, for Genesis, any console basically that's up to about the Sony PlayStation 1 era, it will play really well. Beyond that, the Plus version we've got can kind of play Dreamcast, depending on the game, fairly okay. Some better than others. Soul Calibur one's pretty sweet, I would say, at full resolution.
I was going to say, if it's playing Dreamcast games, it'll easily play any Atari ST game.
Yes, but would you want to? Because there's going to be a point where you're going to. It says press something on the keyboard, and then you go, right, where's my virtual keyboard?
Yeah, that's no fun.
Yeah. I guess you're right. Yeah, I forgot about the keyboard and the mouse.
And that is the distinction. Like, you won't want to play Lemmings on that little thing where it wasn't designed for the D-pad. You play the Mega Drive version of Lemmings or something like that. You would not play the Atari ST version. And that is actually one of the things I got more into the computer side just recently, because although I've got a lot of the original hardware in terms of consoles, there's many emulators and things you can pick up. The dream would be to have a Mr. FPGA. And for a console, because you're just basically plugging in a gamepad, generally it's going to be good enough and a really fantastic experience in terms of hardware emulation, if you want to attach emulation to FPGA in any sense. But for computers, there's always those unique keys it's got, and that's when it's going to get a little bit more complicated. So I didn't actually mind getting the computers, and they look nice. Yeah, so anyone who is watching the video, that's an Acorn Archimedes A3010 with its nice green keys, which I used to own back in the day. Sadly got rid of it, and now got one again.
Yeah,
the circle of life.
Certainly with me, with the hardware, stuff failing and having to kind of make bits and bytes of bits, that's half the fun of it. I mean, I'd lost count of the machines that I've bought that have needed work. I bought an Amiga 4000 that cost me quite a sum of money, and once I'd got it all fixed up, I recapped it. There were some issues with it. It literally has just sat there since and not really been used. And certainly for me, it's great having them, but like as you say, it's a lot of people expect to be able to pick up these old machines and just turn them on and go, oh, okay. Where do I connect them? Oh, wait, no, my monitor doesn't support 15 hertz. Oh, wait, no, I need this, I need that. So I can see where a lot of the kind of the emulation that's available now. The problem is, to me, it just doesn't have that nostalgic feel. There's nothing to feel, there's nothing to touch. Yes, you've got the games, and I think also you can kind of be overwhelmed by the amount of games that are on there. It's not like Christmas Day. Oh, look, got 2 Mega Drive games, and you play the hell out of them. Mm-hmm. But these days, it's like, oh well, I've got 7,500 games just for one single platform. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll play this one for 3 minutes. This isn't really what I expected. And then you go and play another one. Oh wait, and let's go and play another one. And that's, to me, certainly, it kind of takes the shine off it.
I would have to agree. But I mean, you've got the knowledge and the confidence, Karl, that you can think, I can take a bit of a punt on this, and when it arrives, if something doesn't work, you've got a good chance of getting it working again.
Yes,
whereas for me, I'm researching everything.
Yeah.
And I used to, one of my first jobs was actually doing PCB assembly, so that was lucky. So I know I've got some soldering. I've got some soldering. I don't want to scold anyone. I've got soldering skills. So like the resistors, the capacitors, the diodes, the chips. I did that many years ago. So I'm quite confident with that, although I was a bit rusty until recently when I started picking it up again. But, for a lot of people, they might think, oh, yeah, I'd love to buy an Amiga A500. Great. I had one of those as a child. And then they get it home and think, what do I plug it into? Where's the HDMI? Yeah. And then they realise...
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
It really is. And there was a colleague at work who acquired, because he'd had one many years ago and he wanted one again, a PlayStation 1. Completely forgetting the fact of, well, how do I plug it into my TV? Because it's all changed now.
And it's kind of a bit of a barrier to ownership as well. Obviously I sell kind of refurbished machines as well. And I'd say probably about 50% of the inquiries that I get, I'll say to the people, look, brilliant, this is what it is, and And then I say, well, you just remember you need a way to connect it to a modern TV. They're like, oh, what would you recommend? And I'm like you. I'm like, oh, maybe an OSSC or a GBS control. And they're like, oh, how much are those? I'm like, yeah, they're probably going to be about £100. Like, if you want a good experience out of it, not kind of some jittery, kind of like awful, laggy, bouncy SCART HMI converter. And they're like, oh, okay. I said, well, to be honest with you, you're better off just to go and buy an Amiga Mini. But yeah, it's that thing, and I think as a lot of these machines get older and older, it's kind of restricting the ownership to them. Not completely, but to more the people that already have the equipment that can make use of them. Which is why I think that so many of the Anbernic stuff and like the mini consoles are really starting to fly off the shelves. It's because it just makes it. Yes, you've got that kind of nostalgic experience. They come with like an official feel, well, kind of an old school controller and things. So you get that slightly nostalgic hit when you play them, but without the barrier. So you can fire them up with a USB-C power adapter. You can connect them using HDMI. And unfortunately, I think that is going to be the future of retro computing. Isn't really retro computing, which is quite sad. And I say, Misters, as you say, an FPGA emulation just gets even more expensive, even quicker. So
there's a lot of wonder in having the real hardware.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of cost, and as soon as you start adding it up, buying something like a Mr. FPGA, which, at first entry you think, it's about probably £400 to have a decent setup with the add-ons, or if you get the kits. But if you do it in retro hardware, I'm going to buy, I don't know, a SNES. Probably pick one of those up quite cheaply secondhand. But once you factor in everything else, you're getting closer and closer to that Mr. FPGA cost, and it does so many systems, so many. So ironically, I said to somebody just before hit, I shouldn't say the C word, YouTube will pick up on that, before the C word hit, that I was going to get a Mr. FPGA because that made financially so much sense. But then the C thing started, and then it was like, I've got all this time now. What should I do with this extra time I find myself with? I'm a little bit bored. And before I knew, I was buying retro game consoles and loving every minute of it. And yeah, definitely more expensive than Mr. FPJ if you add them up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, like I've got an Uno FPGA that I bought quite recently just to see what it was any good. And I think the thing is that unless you kind of really know and understand the system and the kind of the limitations of like software emulation, a normal person wouldn't know the difference between this and a Retroid Pocket 2 or 2S actually, which can do everything that this does for less than half the price. And I say, like the Anbernics, this will do emulation of pretty much anything, and it will even do PS2. And
what is that?
So that's the Retroid Pocket 2S.
You're not allowed to buy it, Tony.
That looks good.
So they are lovely. Hold on, I've got a little bit of a fascination with them. Let's get another one. So we also have the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, which is more of a 16:9 form factor in this kind of like beautiful,
almost looks like a Switch.
Yes. Well, hold on.
As in the light.
Yeah. So let's have a look. So obviously there's your Switch, and it's kind of
it's a nice
just
size.
like that. And it's this is more about. Sorry, I'm jumping around like an idiot. It's more like akin to PSP. An original PSP. And I think that was the thing, is that the actual screen resolution, or I think the screen resolution might be very similar, but the aspect ratio between the two is pretty much perfect. As I say, this runs Android, so you can literally just do what you want. It's just there's some nice kind of like skins that come with it from the factory, and then you can just load it full of ROMs and just really make it your own. But this will do. certainly, I think they've just released a version 4 of it, because there's a lot of PS2 that this will do. And I'll say PS2 historically has been a bit of a difficult one for a lot of small kind of emulation devices. But yeah, the new one will do PS2. I think most of it. But yeah, certainly for like PSP emulation, this is absolutely fantastic. Because I say it's already got the aspect ratios. So obviously the PSP is kind of like widescreen and stuff. So yeah, these are really good. But again, another slippery slope for you to go down. I think this was nearly touching the £200 mark though. So a bit more than the Anbernic. But to me, to me, it's a much, much, much better experience than some of like the. Is it the Miu Minis? Is it Miu? I can't remember what the
something like that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So it's more like that Game Boy.
Which is the one I recommended.
Yeah,
not the Miu. It was it's the Anbernic one.
Yeah, I mean they're great, but I mean I think for me certainly you've got especially with the flexibility of it having Android, you've got then the option to look at kind of quite a number of games from the Play Store, but then essentially you can just load it up with as many emulators and things as you want. And certainly for me, with the key thing was having access to Amiga Game Selector, which is AGS, which is a let's see if I can put it up actually.
While you do that, Karl, the reason me and Martin were quite intrigued by the Anbernic was it reminded us of like the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. It was that form factor, and also it had a 4:3 screen. And of course, if you ignore the PSP for a minute, most retro stuff was always the 4:3 format.
Yeah.
You could carry it anywhere. You plug your headphones in, and it was just a nice portable device. What you're suggesting goes above and beyond that. So you've got a nice widescreen display. What the Anbernic hasn't got is an analog stick in any way, shape, or form, which is a bit unusual given it now supports Dreamcast, which is one analog stick. So at least one analog stick might have been nice, but it's room on the thing. But, for the vast majority of stuff, it's a really nice... I mean, Tony, if you ignore the fun you've had with files and updates, in terms of the hardware, like the screen and the buttons and everything, how do you find it?
It's all right. The screen's good. As you know, part of the reason that I wanted to do all this was to play Ridge Racer on the PS1, and I did actually get it running, and it's actually a bit fiddly. So I've kind of abandoned that idea. I've got my PS1 working again with a 15 quid HDMI lead, which appears to work. It's now running on the TV, so that's how I'm going to play that. Because it's just not the device for that particular game. I think. I'm using it for mainly just like a bit of research. I look at a lot of old games just to see how they did certain things. So as opposed to playing hours and hours on a particular thing, I just occasionally go, oh yeah, I should look at that, and it's just part of the way I research stuff. I'll read about a particular game that no one's thought about for 20 years or something, and if I can boot it up on something and have a quick little play on it, it's quite interesting for me. So that's probably mostly what I'll do on it.
It really is just a pick up and play device. It's too small for longer gaming sessions for sure.
Yeah. So Game Boy might be the thing, actually the sweet spot for that device, I think. But actually, James, I was going to ask you, can I run Linux games on it? Because in theory, I should be able to, shouldn't I?
I don't know. I think we spoke about this briefly in the last podcast, and I've not gone that far with it. That's another rabbit hole for another day, definitely.
Weren't you hinting that you could run ScummVM on it?
That is possible, absolutely. But that's because there's a package for ScummVM.
Right, but it must be a Linux one.
I'm trying to think what the name of the software is. It's RetroArch.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's on there. So basically anything that could possibly run under that, you could potentially get in there. So ScummVM, you could get on it because RetroArch has it. So as long as it's got the required files, it should run absolutely fine. Although, just as a little drop before Karl goes into his explanation of what he wanted to do. I'll be very quick, Karl. ScummVM is now available officially on the Apple App Store. Now, for years and years and years, you would have had to have jailbroken your device to get ScummVM on there. Now it's actually on the App Store, which is fantastic news. And I've tried it on my iPad, and playing Broken Sword on the iPad is beautiful using ScummVM.
How do you get the games into it?
I've written a guide on pixelrefresh.com. Sorry, it's coming more like an advertisement. Basically, in a nutshell, there's a web interface. So you put in basically the IP of your iPad, which you can find from the ScummVM app. And then it brings up this nice little web interface. And from there, you can drag and drop your files in.
Wow. That seems very un-Apple.
It does. It sounds like...
I expected a walled garden, yeah. That sounds a bit crazy, to be honest with you.
Well, given it's taken many years for this to finally become possible. Where's the quote? I was speaking to Eugene Sandalenko. Tony will remember Eugene. He was on this podcast not so long ago. And since ScummVM is not an emulator and does not allow running any program or code, it has been allowed onto the store. That's the official line. So bear in mind, ScummVM is literally a lot of different engines which have been recreated. So you're basically just putting your data files for the game on there, and then it's reading that through the engine.
I don't think there's any problem with its emulation side, really. I can see them not being too upset about that these days.
They don't have emulators on the App Store.
Well, it's not an emulator, is it, really?
No, exactly that. And that's how they've got onto the App Store.
It's just a big engine. It's just 30 game engines all compiled together. But the question was always, to me, from in my mind, how you'd get those ROMs, the original game data, which you need to drop in on a PC. You drop it into a directory, and ScummVM goes, "Oh look, there's Broken Sword. Now we can play it because we can load its data files." There wouldn't have been any way to do that on iOS previously. That was in any way
through
legal.
The web interface, or don't forget now, there's the Files app. So you could download one of your games, funnily enough, Tony. You could go download the file and then open your Files app. And from there, you can put it in the new ScummVM section and run it that way. But that's only if you're downloading the game from like the ScummVM website, for example. If you've got a catalogue which you've amassed like I have over years, where you've had the original CDs, you just extract the game files you need, and then you normally play them in ScummVM on your computer, but now you can drag those same files for the iPad or iPhone version. It's beautiful playing it on the iPad. Point and click adventures. When Broken Sword Reforged comes out, it's the iPad version I want. Karl.
No, I'm quite just surprised that Apple would allow something like that, because I know they've when you said it, I kind of expected it to say, right, here's the games library that it's going to ship with. Oh wait, no, you can buy extras by buying them from the Apple Store so that they can take their little cut. But no, that's surprising actually. I've never seen.
It's interesting because it's taken many years to achieve this, and even the news on the ScummVM website, it was buried among, here's the new version of ScummVM, here's all the new game engines and things it features and the games it now supports. Yeah. Oh, and one more thing, we're on the App Store, or words to that effect. And that was it. And I just read that last line and I'm thinking, I wonder how many people have noticed that little bit at the end. That's really important news. If anything, that was probably the most important bit of news. So that was the bit I picked up on and posted. And that that got me as many visits in a few days than I would normally get in a month.
Yeah. So it was a surprise. What's the mouse emulator or mouse kind of experience like on it? Is it true point and click, or is it kind of like drag the cursor around with you?
You can literally press in the area, but I found that a little bit clunky, and I'm sure they will find it over time. But you can switch the control method, so as you drag, you can actually see the pointer around where you are and just move it around, which is what I actually preferred.
You can run an iPad with a mouse anyway, can't you? Know?
You can indeed. That I haven't tested. And if you've got an iPad with the keyboard case type thing, you usually have a little trackpad. I haven't tried that yet either. I was too shocked the fact it was actually out on the iPad.
Yeah, nice. I might try that.
Yes, you should read pixelrefresh.com. You'd see the guide, you'd see the news. It's highly recommended. The co-host of the Game and Gadget podcast, is really worth listening to as well. So yeah, that was quite big news for ScummVM. Karl, you wanted to show us something.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, shit. Sorry, pardon me. There we go. That's just... there you go. That kind of gives you the idea of it running in 4x3. That's... I know you can't quite see it because of the... so that's Amiga Game Selector, which essentially is like a... kind of like a front end to all of the WHD load games and apps available. So yeah, you can see, I mean, even something like that, even though it is slightly wide, one thing that I found, certainly with the smaller emulation machines like some of the Anbernic and more kind of the Game Boy form factor ones, is that because they're so close together, you end up hunched over them, and it's not always the most comfortable experience when you're hunched over with your arms across. It just doesn't feel natural. So yeah, certainly with these, because you've got that kind of more relaxed gaming position, it's quite nice actually. And then obviously you've got your analog sticks as well, which then opens it up for kind of like PlayStation games and stuff. But yeah, certainly well worth a look. So they're not cheap, but then
I mean, this is
it,
it, isn't it? You can go from about the £40 mark and get a decent experience. I think for money, the Anbernics were the ones I've experienced are very decent for that price.
Yeah.
But then, of course, it's like anything. You move up in the scale, you get more features, your bigger screens are now available.
Oh, yeah,
and
definitely.
Original hardware is great. I love original hardware. I've got quite a bit of original hardware now. Certainly nothing in the numbers that Karl has in his selection. But, I've got a nice little collection going. Yeah. I love the fact I've got the Acorn Archimedes A3010, which are quite hard to find these days. And that's got a Gotek drive. It actually came with one pre-fitted, which would have been quite a pain to sort out myself. But, there's lots of options. But you've mentioned the A500 Mini, which seemed to do pretty well. And I think they're actually doing a full-size version of it. So it would be an A500 emulated, but with a full-size Amiga keyboard and all the other bits and bobs you would hope. I wish they did with the Commodore. There was the C64 Mini, and then that had a full-size... I think it was the C64 Max, was it?
Yes, yeah. They've just released the Amstrad. Is it the... Atari, is it 400? Or at least certainly...
so the Atari 2600 has got like this big thing where you can actually plug in real cartridges, and then now there's going to be an Atari 400 type mini thing.
Yeah.
Not the one I would have gone for. I preferred the 65XE if we were going into the 8-bit realms of Atari. But again, it's opening up the market to these possibilities. And for a lot of people who remember those times, but not as quite as invested as we are, where we would spend hours just researching and getting how to get the best out of it, what cables to get, how to connect this, blah, 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 how to fix that, what capacitors do I need, what should I replace first, is the battery going to leak and kill the motherboard, whatever it may be. That's probably for us. But I think for most people, they just want one of these minis that can... What I want to play cannon fodder. Great.
Exactly.
Here's the big Ray 500.
Plug and play,
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably for 95% of the audience of these kind of things, and like a mini console is really what they need. And I know it's sad to say. I mean, and I think that's why certainly now, as us kind of oldies are starting to die off, as I say, the kind of the market and the kind of the appeal of a lot of the old hardware is going to go down, to be honest with you. And as I say, a lot of people come and say, "Oh, I want to buy an Amiga. Which Amiga?" And by the time I've spoke to them, I'm not selling them anything. They've gone out and buy an Amiga Mini, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Shot myself in the foot a little bit there. But the thing is, it's right. Is that just most people just want an easy experience that takes the barriers away of kind of playing the old games that they remember. I say the Amiga Mini is certainly great for that, but there is a little bit of technical knowledge that if people want to add games to it, they've not really made it that easy to do. I mean, you have to download the WHD load versions and kind of get all your memory, get the memory stick right, which has been really nice thing that Amiga Game Selector's done. But again, there's still that barrier. You've still got to download it from a torrent and kind of install it, make sure all the Kickstart ROMs and everything like that are all in place. So yeah, I think there's no easy way to do it. And then then even buying one of these the little Anbernic devices that come preloaded, there's still that option to tinker, but it is more of a turnkey solution, I guess.
Yeah, pick up and play, hopefully.
Yeah.
Which, if you buy old hardware, not really, not really at all. Now, Tony, last podcast we spoke about you were shipping a Steam Deck to Ukraine, which was more complicated than maybe we even realised. What is the latest news on that? Is it made its way there, or is it in limbo?
Yeah, I can't remember what we said, but the problem was, I mean, no couriers will take stuff with batteries these days, as I found out the hard way, and very few couriers further still are going into Ukraine, even though it's you have to go via Poland, then it goes like across land into Ukraine. So anyway, but the post office, the Royal Mail, they've opened up so you can go Royal Mail to Ukraine, no problem at all. But you look at their website, and there's 2 pages basically, or several pages, and one of them says, you read it and you go, well, that's kind of saying no to a Steam Deck that's got a battery in it, and they're quite clear. But then there's another page somewhere else that kind of you look at it and you go, well, that kind of says slightly different. So I thought I'd just chance it. So anyway, we sent this thing Royal Mail to Ukraine, and it kind of went. You watch the tracking going outwards as opposed to inwards. It's just as exciting watching for those updates. So anyway, it sits in a processing center at Sheffield for a while, and then it goes off, and it actually then it appeared to take off. So that was, and then it must have left the country. That's the hard bit done, or at least one of the hard bits done. So they actually accepted it. So that was good. And then it disappeared for quite a while, and then it popped up, and presumably it was in Poland, and then it popped up in Ukrainian customs, where it sat for the best part of 3 weeks. and Ukraine has 2 postal systems based. There's one called Nova Poshta, which is a private post office, which is the best thing ever. It's just brilliant. If they said they were going to set up in the UK, we'd celebrate. It's such a good service. Just very quickly, if you're sat in Ukraine, okay, and you've got in your hand, say, a wine glass, and you're in one, say you're in Lviv, right, and you say, I want to send this to my friend in Kiev, and you could literally walk to a Nova Poshta, which they're on every high street, hand them the glass and say, I want to send that to this address, and they go, okay, and they'll wrap it up for you, right, package it, send it, and it'll cost you like 20p or something. The next day it'll turn up in Kiev, and it's the best service ever. But the other one, there's the national one, the Ukraine Post, which is a bit more shaky and Soviet, and maybe things occasionally never get there. There's always a sense that might happen. So anyway, something with this is a Steam Deck, and a certain amount of value could have gone astray. But anyway, it did eventually. It came out of customs with a big $100 charge on it, and turned up in Kiev and about a week ago. So yeah, it took a while, but it's there now.
So the person who was meant to have it now has it.
My friend Ruslan has his Steam Deck, and he's going to help me get Wormhole Dungeon building for the Steam Deck. So that's good.
Well, that's fantastic news. Well done on achieving the most impossible by the sound of it. So what was the $100 charge for?
Just customs.
Just customs. They didn't say, hey, there's a battery in this, mate. $100.
$100 spent. No, they didn't. It was just what you would expect. There's quite a lot of duty on certain types of things.
Wow. Well done. There you go. Yeah. So your game could soon appear on a Steam Deck.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do a Steam Deck build, which would be very good for demoing it, because I'm gonna take it around to people I know and let them play it soon and see what they say. Steam Deck would be a great way to do that.
And there's other platforms you were looking at as well, weren't there? Well, the Dreamcast was one.
Dreamcast we might do, yeah. That should be quite easy, in theory. I've got like three other things sat under my desk waiting to do that. Actually, one of those I'll have to send to Ukraine as well. But that should be all right, because there's no battery in it.
No battery, exactly.
Yeah, Ruslan he'll help me with that as well if we do that. But that's further down the line. But Fantastic. fancy doing Amiga as well. Actually, Karl, here's a question for you: is no one making a new Amiga? Can you not buy an Amiga that's like fresh circuit board that's not FPGA?
There's emulator.
You look at Amiga Addict magazine, and there are adverts in there for things that look like they must be an Amiga. They're like super Amigas. They're selling them as like with better spec and all the rest of it. They look to me like
Hold on. Let me reach across and grab something else. So there is. Let me show you. So, and as I say, this was born from the issues with as James quite rightly pointed out, with the batteries leaking on on the Amiga 500 Plus, on the Amiga 500 Pluses. So this is probably one of the most custom machines that you'll probably see. So that is a Amiga 500 Plus. So essentially, there's a guy called Rob, and I got this off his store on Tindy. And essentially, it's a reproduction Amiga 500 Plus motherboard. But again, obviously, it's great having that, but you need the custom chips for it. So, but the thing is, there's a lot of work still going on right now, so that quite a large proportion of the custom chips have been re-released with FPGA solutions and other bits and bobs, so that it isn't dependent on having those custom chips anymore. I say with this one, I mean, it did have a PyStorm in it, so that essentially would take the CPU away from it. This has got the HDMI to this has got the RGB to HDMI adapter in it, but I say you still need the Denise chip in it as well. And again, that's got a Gotek with like an internal screen and stuff. So I mean, most of it is new, but there still are some things that you need for it.
I can't remember what it was called. I saw a thing, and it was like a little square box, and I should have. I've got an Amiga.
Was it?
It's a little tiny. No, it's a little tiny thing, and it's got a funny name. I should.
I think if I remember, was it something by AmiKit? I'm just trying to think what it would be. But I say this. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things with the Amiga community right now is that kind of. I mean, there's a massive resurgence in kind of products and stuff like that that's been released. I think a lot of that is off the back of, as you say, from. And I say there's so much going on. The community is pretty buoyant in the UK. You've got things like the new Kickstart events that have been. Well, there was the first one. There's a second one this year as well, and there's so many kind of new Amiga user groups popping up as well. But as I say, I don't really know. Certainly at the minute that there's really the appetite for kind of a new Amiga as such. I think that so much of kind of like all the software and everything like that, if something strays too far away, nothing's going to run. And I think the thing that why a lot of people are still now coming back to Amiga and kind of other retro systems in general is that obviously they've got the nostalgia for it. So if you were to say, right, here's a new Amiga for 2024, people are just going to go, that's nice. Yeah. But does it play cannon fodder? So
I don't necessarily mean like a Super Amiga with a better spec, although I'm sure that's what I saw advertised. But I mean, what I would like is to buy a smaller little board, like a Spectrum Next board that's an Amiga 1200 basically with a HDMI port on it.
Yeah, I mean, like things like the Minimig, like this. I mean, this will do it 100%, but obviously it's FPGA.
Yeah,
and
that's right. I don't care about that.
I mean, it's absolutely great. I mean, this is as close to an original Amiga experience as you're going to get without having original hardware. I mean, even to the point where it's got like jail bars on the screen. I mean, it really is like 100%. It's a beautiful experience.
And how much is that roughly?
I think for a lot of the FPGA solutions, I don't think you're talking for a lot of change for about £300 new. I was quite lucky to secure this off eBay a little while ago, and it certainly wasn't that. But again, they're really they can get expensive real quickly, especially like with all the add-on boards and stuff like that you need on them as well. I think these go for anywhere between like 150 to 200 quid, but yeah. I mean, I think if you were looking for a true Amiga experience, especially like if you're looking at the development side of it, then yeah, that's perfect. But I'm quite lucky to know quite a lot of the Amiga development community, and essentially they still just use emulation. So it's and as the beauty of it is that I've been quite lucky in the fact that I do have a few Amigas kicking around that I've been able to help with like beta testing and stuff like that, and say finding issues that somebody without real hardware would possibly find.
I mean, you're going to do a day's development or a week's development on a Mac or Windows or whatever, and then it pays in my experience to once in a while run off a copy and run it on the real thing and see what happens, and not to leave that too long between, But I've not got. I mean, this is a tiny flat. There's no space on my desk for an Amiga 1200. Definitely.
Yeah.
Which brings me to, this is very important, Karl. Maybe you can help me here, or you'll probably end up helping Tony more. In terms of the ownership of Amiga, to get a broader base to be able to run Tony's game, to get the biggest audience share, I would say the A500 is going to be the way to go. But Tony seems quite insistent that the A1200, the more powerful of the two, is probably going to be the better. Here we go. Go on, Tony.
As a developer, I mean, the lower chipsets are a nightmare. So, you just, I mean, if you can, you just, and I said the games that I've seen, new games, they're often AGA chipset because it's just the graphics look good, full color and all the rest of it, and the memory map's more sensible and all the rest of it. So, having back in the day, having to support the different chipsets was a nightmare. So I don't know. I've just seen a few games come out. Adrian's games. What's it? Dungeonette and the other one, Cyberpunk. I mean, his thing, AGA. And I understand why he did that, and presumably he sold it all right. It's done all right. So, I mean, I hated those other lesser chipsets back in the day. If you have to support them, then I will. But blimey, having to support, when the graphics have got to be different format, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, there's been. I think the thing is recently is that, especially as better tools have evolved, and also as kind of a lot of the older devs are kind of like honing their skills with having kind of more resources on their doorstep. I mean, you've got things like I don't know, have you seen Secanoid, which was a port from a AAA game from Thalamus, which Hoffman did, and running on a 500, it's absolutely spectacular. I mean, the particle effects and everything is just amazing. And there's been quite a few of them like that have come out for lower end Amigas that are just absolutely spectacular.
I'm not saying I won't do it. I mean, I've not looked into this at all. I was just speculating, really. But I remember in our Steel Sky days, our biggest problem was the different chipsets. So here we are, 30 years later, and thinking of getting back into it again. If the market is split across chipsets still, then that's fine. It can be done.
Yeah.
But, I just noticed. I mean, a friend of mine, he did AGA only and did all right. So maybe I was thinking, is that the way it's done these days? If it's not, then fine.
And by the way, I'm being purely selfish here because I'm an A500 owner.
Yeah.
With no intention of getting an A1200 because those are quite a bit more expensive.
Well, I think that's a lot of the barrier, is that kind of, certainly for me, is that you kind of, if somebody just wants to experience an Amiga these days, you can pick up an Amiga 500 on eBay for sometimes quite often less than £100, and they're pretty bomb-proof. There's not an awful lot to go wrong with them. Okay, there might be some issues with like the keyboard membrane, but I mean, other than that, I mean, the floppy drive might be a bit rubbish, so you'd have to say proper Gotek in it, and you're pretty much away. The further up you go, the more issues that you have. I mean, certainly with things like the 1200, you've got the caps that can go, and they're just that bit more complex, and also the barrier to buying them could be quite a lot as well. I mean, a decent sorted 1200 can set you back minimum of like £500 and above, and that's before you throw an accelerator in it. So
I'm watching them on eBay, and they're not cheap, are they?
No. So it's
James needs to win the lottery for that one.
Yeah. It's a difficult one to say. It's but the thing is, I think that certainly the people that would want to buy new Amiga games certainly wouldn't worry too much if they've got to emulate it to play it, because things like WinUAE are so good these days that it's not so much of a problem.
Yeah. I mean, and presumably, and it'll play on the mini thing as well, of course.
Yeah. I mean, and say even things like some of the new releases. There's a developer, Nivrig, that I'm quite good friends with, and I say he specifically has tested his games with the Amiga Mini, so to make sure that they will work, because I say there's such a big market now within the Amiga community for the Mini, and I say it just opens it up, because obviously the Mini will do AGA, so it's there's a lot out there, but I mean, what you target, I don't know, it's a difficult one.
Well, it's as difficult as it was. Well, no, it's not. It's slightly less difficult. No, it's more. It wasn't difficult back in the day because you had no choice. I mean, can make a choice now, but it kind of looks to me like that mini thing is he's almost a platform in its own right now, isn't it?
Yeah, and say the wicked little machines. I say, just going back to the machine. Obviously, just one thing to take into consideration is that if you're going to kind of want to do a full featured game, is that there's kind of the options to get anything that's a hard disk installer on a 500 might be a bit of a challenge for a lot of people. Obviously, you can go down the line of multi-disc, which is great, but as I say, I think a lot of people for the bigger games, obviously they've got like WHD load package for it, which means that you're kind of then Amiga 600 because it's easy to pop a hard disk in it, or Amiga 1200. But I say if it's single floppy, which
the last game I did
poses challenges in itself.
The last game I did for Amiga was 14 discs.
Yeah. So no, it's God, it's an interesting. But the thing is as well is that I don't really know enough about Amiga development to kind of really.
I didn't know anything.
Add anything useful, to be honest with you.
I'm tiptoeing back into it. It's probably something for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, certainly people like Nivrig and Hoffman. He does like a weekly. Well, I'm not so sure he's doing it anymore. But he was doing like weekly development streams for the games that he was porting. So certainly when he was porting Secanoid, which was a lovely one. As I say, all the people that were involved in it and were beta testing in it kind of had their name in lights in weird secret rooms and stuff. It's amazing just to kind of see it happen live. And he did the same with his port of Metal Gear as well. From the MSX, and really, really nice, really nice. But no, it's I mean, it's something I'd love to do some kind of software development, but it's never going to happen. Never going to happen. So
why not,
Tony? What?
Yeah.
How much time do we need? How much time do we need, Tony, to learn to become developers?
Well, it depends what you want to do. I mean, there's a million ways into it. There's a lot of ways into it. Some things are harder than others. There's a lot of guys. I mean, I'm quite close to the Next community, Spectrum Next, and that's actually, I mean, it's a good machine, and you can do it. It's quite powerful with its basic language and stuff. But there's a lot of people going, "Oh, I'm going to write a machine code game," and that's actually quite difficult. It's not like. It's not like writing something in Lua on the PC, which is what I'm doing, which is which is gloriously easy and simple. It's actually quite a lot more difficult. So, it all depends where you're coming from, really. And, people buying themselves Next and going, right, I'm going to finally write that machine code game I want to do in the 80s. It's going to be real hard, to say the least. With Z80, I did a little bit before Christmas as just a fun thing to do one day. And goodness me, assembly language, it's a lot harder than what we're used to these days.
I bet. I mean,
I know there's some options available for the Amiga, which is the Scorpion engine, which there's been some really nice games that are being produced in that in the minute. And yeah, lovely, but yeah, I think my biggest barrier is just time. Especially with having little uns and stuff, it can be quite a challenge just to do all the other things that I want to do, let alone try and dedicate a portion of it to game development.
It would be hard to do a retro thing, yeah.
So when are we going to see a demo, Tony? Any ideas?
Of Wormhole? February.
February? That's not far away. Okay, well, let's try and do a on-screen display of Wormhole, of your demo. I think that should be important. Then we can talk about the development of it and how you've managed to get it. Because I saw you've been posting little snippets.
Snippets, yeah.
Yeah, on Threads, which upset me. You've moved more conversational to Threads now. You've moved away from Mastodon. How dare you?
To be honest, Twitter still works the best of any of them, but
no. Don't you mean X, formerly known as Twitter, which everyone has to refer to it as now?
It's an act of defiance to call it Twitter, isn't it? Because one day it'll be Twitter again. The darkness will pass at some point.
Yeah, by them going bankrupt, probably.
Yeah, probably, yeah. And then someone will buy it.
Okay. I don't think anyone's going to buy it. I'll buy it for £1. Okay, so it's yours. We're earning 20 million debt or something ridiculous. But yes, we very much look forward to seeing your game in action. You've put snippets on Threads, and it looks extremely impressive. And as I said in the comments on one of them, all the little effects and things, it looks almost retro in style. It's got that sort of feel, but it's done it in a you have to see it, basically. So that's why I think we need to do a special video.
The idea is you go back to when all that era ended, and you just skip forward to now as if it never ended. Yeah, that's where the game carries on.
I like that.
So if that makes sense, it doesn't really make sense, but it's like the Amigas carried on. It's like if imagine Amiga was the only platform and it kept being developed, and what's an Amiga of 2024 in some sort of strange alternate universe, then that's what the game is.
Okay, this is the best way to describe it for the kids today. You ready for this?
It's not a very good way to describe it, but
if you've seen the Marvels and the Marvel Universe, and of course there was Thanos where he clicked his fingers and then half of the universe disappeared. Now imagine all the universe disappeared except for developers. And then you come back and you're brought back to all this wonderful game information, but the hardware hasn't changed.
Yeah, it's like, well, I suppose it's like Amigas never went away and there was like 2 more models. I suppose that's a better way of...
The A500 Plus.
It's the A800 version of the game.
Oh dear. Well, look, it's been fantastic talking to you both. We've definitely run out of time on this particular episode. Karl, you've definitely got to join us again in the future. We haven't even touched some of the modifications you can do and the repairs that you've had to do. So that'll be a wonderful topics to go through on the next one. And Tony, as ever, we follow your game progression, and when the demo comes out, when the full game comes out, the Dreamcast version, and the Amiga A500 version, which I'm still hoping for.
Didn't I say A800, James?
Yeah. A800. Okay, well, there's a story about the A600 somewhere in the myths. I think that was meant to be the A300. So it's just numbers, Tony. It's just numbers. But anyway, thanks to Tony. Thanks very much to Karl. And this is Game & Gadget Podcast number 33, and we will see you next time.